Recognize that tune, and you know it's time for Diggin with 7 and Tennessee Jeff. Join us for the next hour as we talk metal detecting with tonight's special guest. We hope you'll join in the conversation through the chat room. Post your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. You're listening to Relics Radio on Spreaker. Okay, we're live on Relics Radio. I'm Diggin with 7.
And I'm Tennessee Jeff.
Sit back for the next hour. We got a special guest with us tonight, Civil War relic hunter, Mr. BirdDogg. Yeah, we're going to be talking to BirdDogg, and we'll watch the chat. Nobody in the chat on my end right here. I don't know.
I don't see any yet.
I don't know if the chat's locked up or what. But anyway, we've got BirdDogg with us. Are you there, BirdDogg?
I'm here. How you fellas doing in Kentucky?
Oh, we're doing great.
Pretty good.
Had a lovely day here today. I guess the same for you over in Tennessee.
Yeah.
It
was beautiful down here in Tennessee. Another beautiful day. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more beautiful weather through the weekend and get to do some relic hunting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, we've got deer season going on, and, of course, a lot of my farms, they have deer hunters, so we have to kind of watch that. So.
Yeah, it's that time of year, there's no doubt. And I guess all the boys are up in Virginia doing the disco detecting and the DIV hunt, so I hope they're all doing well and the weather goes well for them up there as well.
We wish them the best.
Yeah, we've got a guest that we're going to have on here in a couple of weeks that was at a couple of DIV hunts and everything. Looks like Josh is on from Beyond Sight and Sound and Matt Purdue. Hello, guys.
How you doing?
Sure do appreciate you. BirdDogg just got back from Boston. Am I right on that?
Yeah, this is actually the second trip I've taken up to Boston here in about a month with my dad. And we've been up there kind of looking for buttons again. We went last year and had a really successful year. We found about 700 or so buttons in 2 days up there. And we went back again this year to kind of check out a few other spots and poke around back where we were hunting again. Mm-hmm. So we had some good success. This year we flew up instead of driving, so it was kind of a much different trip for sure, having to deal with flying into Boston and the traffic up there. But it was a good trip, and we found a lot of buttons again this time. And the previous trip here recently, we went 2 separate locations we've gone to. One up there is a button field where we have used our metal detectors and had a really good trip doing that. I guess it's been about a month ago now. We metal detected and found a bunch of buttons. I found a Revolutionary War Grenadiers button. It has a kind of a grenade on the front of it, and a couple other early buttons that are 1700s, early 1800s buttons there in the button field. A lot of them are foreign buttons,
that'd be nice.
and British. It's a neat field, and I don't know how many buttons I brought home from that field. Probably total maybe 150 or 200 buttons this time from that field.
That's a pretty good haul.
Kinds. Yeah, and there's a lot of them still to clean up. You know, a lot of them are underwear buttons, but there's a lot of one-piece buttons in there and two-piece buttons. So it's neat coming home and kind of cleaning them up. It's sort of a frenzy there when you're digging. You're just kind of filling your bag with buttons, and you worry about cleaning them up a little more when you get home.
Do you ever find any coins mixed in with these buttons?
We have. I found a couple Hessian coins this trip before last that were 1800s coins, 1830s, 1840s coins, and found a real neat merchant token while we were up there, and found a medallion, like a French medal. So you find all kinds of stuff mixed in, and basically you're finding the contents of people's clothing and jackets, and that are mixed into these shoddy mills. And shoddy mills were mills that operated from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and they processed wool. They basically recycled wool. They'd chop it up into small pieces, and they'd mix it in with some regular wool and make a new cloth. And that cloth was inferior cloth. You'd poke holes through it if you weren't careful, and that was why they called it shoddy cloth, and thus the term shoddy. When you speak of something being shoddy, you talk about it being
I learned something
and bad.
I had never heard I'd never heard of the Shoddy Mill until y'all went up there. Was that last year that y'all went up there and dug those?
It was last year when we had the big trip up there, and I hadn't really heard of it either. My dad and his good friend Bob Milburn had kind of researched these things, and my dad had actually written an article about this, about shoddy mills, and I think he's actually in the process of writing another one now. But it's really an amazing place, and they would process this wool in different ways. Some factories would process it by grinding them down and doing things, but others would use carbolic acid, they call it. And what it would do was it would dissolve any cotton in the cloth. So any thread that had sewn the seams of wool clothing together or sewn buttons on would dissolve, but the wool would stay intact. And when that process happened, all the buttons would fall to the bottom of a vat. And at the end of the day, they would take these vats of buttons and acid and dump them out behind the mill.
Oh, man.
And so you find these piles of buttons, and unfortunately, the carbolic acid and in the mills that used carbolic acid, a lot of the buttons, in fact, the majority of the buttons are eaten horribly and are encased in this thick metallic crust, and you have to kind of break it open. It's like a ball. When if you ever pull a mini ball or a relic out of a clump of dirt, still encased in the clump of dirt. It's like that, except it's kind of irony and hard, very, very hard. And you break these balls open and buttons just fall out everywhere.
What's the shape of the button when it comes out of the clod? Is it pretty rough?
Sometimes they're destroyed, and sometimes they look like they were dropped yesterday.
No kidding.
And so it's a big sorting process, and a lot of them are still loose in the piles and weren't affected for some reason or another by the process. And you find a lot of beautiful buttons just laying on top of the ground, but the way we process them is screening them there at the place we call the button mine. And so we basically shovelfuls of dirt and buttons into buckets and then dump them on a big screen and stand over it and try and sort through it the best you can. And it's pretty incredible, really. I shot a video of it, and it doesn't do it justice at all, And the first trip up there, I bet you I had my hands on 50,000 or more buttons sorting them in the process of sorting them. And at the end of the day, there was like a 4-foot high pile of buttons that we had discarded.
Dang.
And it was all buttons. So it's really incredible thing for your mind to process, looking down at a screen with hundreds of buttons in it and trying to find certain shapes. We were looking for shank buttons that had a good shank on them. So, and they're covered in dirt and this carbolic acid kind of residue, which looks like rust. So all of them kind of look the same until you can get them out of there and clean them up. It's really, it's a tricky process in and of itself to get them out of there. So, but it's well worth it. Last year I brought home a lot of buttons. I brought home 700 or more buttons. This year, I think I probably only brought home this last trip, maybe 70 or 80 buttons, but we didn't, in fairness, we only worked the place for about 4 hours this time, and we were really kind of picky about what we were taking out of there this trip, just because we knew we had to fly home.
Yeah, you couldn't put a 5-gallon bucket on the airplane.
Right.
I caught a live YouTube or live Facebook. I don't know which it was that you did. You did a couple of those, and on one of them, I was fortunate enough to had my phone or up here in the Studio One, and caught that. Before we go any further on this, though, let me do a few more shout-outs. We've got some people that have come in. Dave Miller is here.
How you doing,
Certainly
Dave?
Certainly do want to thank Dave Miller again for we just gave away a pin pointer, and that was courtesy of Dave Miller. And so certainly do appreciate that. Got Forrest Stinnett in. Matt Perdue is still there. Josh is here. Duran is here. And so we've got some good people in. And if you've got any kind of a question that you want to throw over to BirdDogg, well, I'll put it in the chat because we're watching that. And this is all about you guys and him. And Josh did say, how do you go about cleaning those buttons from the mill?
Well, it depends. Like I said, some of them will come out of the ground and they look amazing. They still have, you can see gilt on them. And you get home and put a little aluminum jelly on it. You can get that at some hardware stores, and they clean up and they look amazing, right off the bat. Other ones are really rough, and it's sad because you find a lot of buttons that would be amazing buttons, but they're just completely toasted, So it varies depending on how they come out of the ground, just like anywhere else. Some of them are completely destroyed and covered with carbolic acid, and other ones are gorgeous. And I have tried some of the buttons that are, I'm standing here looking at a bunch of them actually right now in the garage, and some of them that are completely encrusted with carbolic acid. I think I'm going to try some different processes with, which I did some last year. I tried small-scale electrolysis with a 9-volt battery, and it works, but it leaves a strange patina on the buttons for sure.
I've tried buttons, and I've tried Cohen's as well, and I really don't like the results that you get.
No, I don't either.
Larry Reynolds has joined us. Hello, Larry.
How you doing, Larry?
Oh, hey, Larry. But it's definitely been a thrill going to the button mines. Like I said, this time I came home with several buttons I was real happy with. A couple Civil War era state seals, and I got a nice Coast Guard button, which my dad and I were both former Coast Guard, so that was a nice button to get in there. And you get a lot of service buttons, post office buttons, railroad buttons out of those shoddy mills, which they're really neat. I think last year I probably got 50 or 60 different railroad buttons, and it was neat to come home and research all these different railroads. Is kind of a different avenue of research for me. But this time I had quite the experience trying to fly home with the buttons. TSA did not know what to make of me carrying on bags full of buttons covered in carbolic acid. And
yeah,
I brought home a big clump of carbolic acid with a button sticking out of it, like to preserve it. And they pulled my bag aside for that and stood there and asked me all about it and what it was and poked at it. And they swabbed every button, it seemed like, with their machine. So that was quite the interesting process for them and me as I was trying to catch my flight out of Boston. But
so you're on the watch list now, the terror watch list.
I probably am. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know if you've seen it or not, but Caitlin came in and left you a message there.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that, but I'm actually not at my computer, but I'll try and get
Okay,
it
she said, "Hey, Dad, good luck and love you."
Okay, well, I love you, Caitlin. It's good to hear from her. She's about to graduate from University of Kentucky here in just a couple of weeks. I got to go to her graduation.
Congratulations.
Got a busy month ahead of me for sure. Getting ready to go to a trip out west and just all kinds of things on the plate coming up. So,
and a lot of people up north don't really understand, but this is our prime hunting time, this time of year right now.
It really is for land hunting in particular. It's just now kind of getting cool enough where I'm willing to land hunt again. I've been hunting so much in the water all summer and just kind of working my psyche back into land hunting again. The button trip was definitely a good way to get that started. And Dad and I actually got to hunt some, metal detect some right around Boston itself, and that was a lot of fun. We found some interesting things. We were hoping to find a lot of older things, which we did find some flat buttons, but I found a really neat World War II soldier's silver ID bracelet, which I thought was neat.
I seen that.
It had his service number and his enlistment date, and it's sterling silver. So it's just an unusual find for me when I'm usually out relic hunting for Civil War stuff, you know. And It was exciting to kind of research about him and what ships he had been on in World War II.
Yeah.
But
got a couple of questions.
The houses up there in Boston are old.
They are old history up there. Got a couple of questions that came in. Larry Reynolds was wanting to know what chemical that you use in electrolysis, and then while you're answering that, also, Duran said, what's the best all-around pulse machine for being user-friendly? I guess he means which one is the easiest to use. And you used, when you and I hunted on one hunt, you had the Garrett ATX. Is that right?
I did. I still have it. Now, if I had my choice, I would be running one of the Mind Lab machines, probably the 4500 or something like that. But having said that, the ATX is pretty user-friendly. You know, it's slightly heavy, but I think they're all heavy. Every pulse machine is going to be heavy. And I think it's relatively user-friendly. It's like all pulse machines, you're going to struggle some with iron with it. But I think it's a good machine. I've also used a TDI, and I will say between the two, I dug way more square nails and things with the TDI. And maybe that was just my lack of familiarity with the machine. But for me, I use the ATX right now until I can afford to get a Mind Lab. And I think it's a good machine for sure. It'll dig relics, and I don't think you'll miss a lot with it.
Yeah.
So, and what was the other?
The other question was Larry Reynolds asked what chemical that you use in your electrolysis.
I use washing powder in my electrolysis, at least for iron. When I'm cleaning shells and that sort of thing, it's Arm & Hammer Super Washing Soda is what it is. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah,
I've big yellow box. Big yellow box, and you can get it anywhere, Walmart or
I've seen
wherever.
some.
And, you know, there's a difference between baking soda and washing soda, because washing soda is sodium carbonate, and baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, and it's a different reaction. So I think you'll get much better results with washing soda than you will with baking soda, which I've seen a lot of people use. So what
electrolysis that I've done, I used just baking soda. I need to try that. I know that some people use 20-multene borax too, which is probably closer to the.
Yeah, and that's the same as this. That's washing soda. It's a sodium carbonate instead of sodium bicarbonate.
Yeah.
So, and then if I was using small scale electrolysis, maybe for buttons, I would definitely I'd probably try baking soda. I don't know. Baking soda works, but it's not as reactive as the washing soda is. So.
Well, if you're working on something that's real delicate, you would probably want baking soda over the more harsh laundry detergent, wouldn't you?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it. I'm certainly no expert on it. I just kind of go with what I know. And honestly, I go with less is more on the smaller items as far as buttons and stuff. I don't think I'd ever electrolyze a button again after my experiments with it, So I'd rather just brush it and clean it the best I can that way than try and do something, overdo it, because I've destroyed several relics trying to clean them. And so now I'm much more on the less is more route.
You had a bayonet, didn't you? Was that you that had the bayonet that did the electrolysis and kind of overdid it just a little bit, or was that somebody else?
No, I haven't really toasted any of my bayonets yet. Knock on wood. I did toast I toasted a musket hammer one time, and I've had a shell kind of disintegrate in electrolysis because the rust or the iron had kind of leached out of the shell. A lot of times shells in water that I've found in water are really fragile, and it's because I guess the iron content gets leached out of the shell, and it just kind of starts to turn into carbon. And they can be super fragile, and you have to really watch it when you're doing electrolysis on them. So, and really, and the people I've talked to have said it's oftentimes better to just boil them repeatedly and, leach out all the salts and minerals that you can out of them through boiling them repeatedly. But
yeah.
And I think that's probably a good practice in general with iron relics, is to boil them so that you can leach out any kind of salts or anything that's in there with them.
Yeah. Gordon is in.
Barb,
hey, Gordon.
Barb is in. And let's see. We had another question up here. Forrest Annette wanted to know what, and I guess this is probably to all of us, what our opinion is on the AT Max. I've never used one.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Jeff and I, a friend of ours, when we were hunting the Gallatin camp, brought one in and was using it.
Yeah, and then, it seemed pretty good. It reminded me a lot of the Gold, the AT Gold, by the way it sounded. It had a lot of chatter, and he did dig a Civil War bullet with it while we were there, and it seemed pretty deep. It was maybe 11 inches deep, but that's all I've seen of them.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to see one yet either, and I'm sure it works probably about as good as the other AT machines. I think they're pretty good machines in general, but again, it's any machine's about as good as its user, and I think that's the big thing, is getting a machine you're comfortable with and learning to use it to its full capability.
That's right. Learn what it's saying to you, because that's what you want to do. Barb says she's got a GPX 4500, and that's what I've got, and I just bought mine this year, and just learning to run it and use it, and I really like it. And but
it's a great machine.
I'll tell you what, if I could only have one detector, well, let me pose that question to you before I answer it. If you could only have one metal detector, what would it be?
That's pretty tough, because I like to hunt water so much, but the water machine I don't really use on land. I would say, I guess if I could only have one metal detector, it would probably be my Nautilus. As ridiculous as that sounds, it would be my Nautilus, just because that's what I've hunted longer than anything with, and I'm probably more comfortable with it, even though it would be useless to me in many situations. If I could only have one, that would be it.
What about you, Seven?
Me, if I could only have one metal detector, it'd be an AT Pro, because I use it in so many different applications. I mean, you use it in water. You can't use it in the ocean with the mineralized soil. I know it's not as deep as some of the other machines like a Deus. It's fast. It's probably not as fast as a Deus. But if I could just have one, it'd be an AT Pro.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would take my
That's
AT
a good call.
I've got the 40.
I mean, I can't argue with it for sure, because I'm a water hunter too, you know, but it's hard to part with the Nautilus.
Yeah, and you've used that so long and got used to that. In fact, the last hunt that I hunted with you guys, your dad was using the Nautilus, and I was using Mind Lab. What did I have?
TDI.
No, CTX 3030 up there with you guys, and he was hearing bullets that I couldn't hear with a CTX on that machine.
Oh, it's a deep machine. We had him up there at the button field using the Nautilus machines there, and you know it's a place with 10 million signals, and he was in there pulling out, you know, beautiful, perfect buttons. He found a snake buckle in there, actually hidden in there with the Nautilus. So there, you know, it's what you know, and I think that's the biggest key to any machine is just knowing it like the back of your hand, knowing everything it's telling you, and running it wide open. You know, turning the discrimination off and the machine wide open, and learning what it's telling you. So the Nautilus is great for that, because you're hunting in all metal mode and discrimination mode at the same time. And you hear the deepest little warble from that all metal mode, and you know there's something down there. So you can dig off 3 or 4 inches, and all of a sudden your discrimination mode starts to work real good, and you can tell if it's a good target or not. So,
well, see, the F-75
incredible machine.
The F-75 LTD, that's the way it was in all metal. I mean, you could go over a target, and if it was a deep bullet that had a different iron tone, it's kind of hard to explain. You just had to have the ear for it. And if you run the F-75 in discriminate mode, it wasn't as good as the AT Pro, I don't believe. But with all metal, it was a real good machine. So.
Tone machines, I think, are you know, the way to go. The numbers and the graphs, and you know, it's great and all, but it's such a variable thing that it's almost worth just listening to the tones. And if you get a good, solid, repeatable tone, just dig the thing. You know, I mean, what's the worst thing? It could be another pull tab or a shotgun shell. So, you know, you're going to get those anyway. So just dig it. I think that's the key to it all. It's such a numbers game. And the more good signals you're digging, the more good relics you're going to get. Just that's the end of the day.
Now, are you using your ATX most of the time on your Civil War hunts?
I am, or at least here. You know, in my area, the soil is really hot, red clay, hot soil. And I've done a lot of tests here with my other machines, and you're only getting about 4 to 6 inches at best around here with my other machines. Whereas the pulse machine just cuts right through it, and you know, you're getting plenty of depth out here with that. So around here, I'm using that relic hunting. Now, if I'm in Colonial, Virginia, where I grew up, I'm going to use the Nautilus or something. Or if I was up north around Boston, I'd use the Nautilus for relic hunting. But I think machines, the other thing about machines is knowing what you're hunting for can determine a lot of times what machine I'm going to use. If I'm going to be in somebody's yard where there's a lot of trash, I might run my T2 or my Garrett AT Pro with the small coil instead of the Nautilus, and I'm definitely not going to run the ATX in somebody's yard because it would look like World War IV happened in it. But,
we've got a lot of places that there's absolutely no way you can use the GPX, but it wasn't made for that. You know, I mean, is made for depth, and I still can't believe how good that those little bitty round balls sound at 2 foot deep. I mean, they still sound so good on those. And you bypass those with the VLF machine because, well, they sound like iron, don't they?
They sound like iron.
Yeah.
That and a 22 bullet, I mean, they sound like a silver coin at 2 inches deep.
Well, and that's why, though, when you're talking about the round ball sounding good to a pulse and not, sounding like iron to a VLF, and that's why people who do have VLFs, if they're in a target-rich environment, they need to just dig everything they hear because, that 6 inches is the difference between you finding that relic or not and it sounding good or not, or if it's a coin or a real or a pistarine, a small silver coin, and it's on its edge, it's going to sound not like a silver coin. It's going to sound like something else. So just learning to chase those signals and learning to have the instinct for when there's relics around and targets are worth digging, that's half the battle is just being willing to chase the targets if you feel like they're there.
Well, I think it's our episode 152 where, or 153. I guess it's 153. I lose track of them. I'm an old man, old brain. But anyway, I found a large scent. And I tell you the truth, BirdDogg, it was the worst signal that I had all day long. Evidently, it was standing up on its edge. And
right.
I cut the top of the plug off, and I was getting a little bit of a high tone that was trying to repeat. That's why I dug it. And whenever I opened up the hole, it just sounded like square nails. I mean, it's just all of that grunt on the AT Pro. But I've got in the habit of sticking my pinpointer down and getting those nails and things out because I've had a few flat buttons, that have done that. Stuck it down there and moved a little bit of dirt, and I actually knocked it over, and I could tell that it was a big disc. And I thought I either had a dandy button or a large scent. Pulled it out, and that's exactly what it was. And what'd you say about discrimination, Jeff?
If you'd been running discrimination, I mean, he never would have heard that iron signal after he got the top plug off, and he would have just left it. So
sure.
Endurance.
Yeah, and that's the thing is fighting your way through that iron with the discrimination off. You're going to start to pull amazing targets out. It's just getting that layer of iron out of the way does wonders sometimes.
And I've seen a lot of times I've dug a button and it'd be a real good signal, and then I lose it, and then it would roll to the bottom of the hole I dug, and it would be out of range of the machine, and then I used the pinpointer to find it that way.
Duran said he's got it right. He said dig it all, and that's exactly what you have to do. And then let's see, we had another question here. Duran wanted to know how do you approach people for permission to dig? What's your secret on that?
Well, you just kind of have to approach people like it's your house, and I think having a game plan and you're basically selling yourself to a landowner in a way, like, hey, I'm a nice guy, I'm a safe guy. Can I go on your property, and look around? So you have to introduce yourself and tell them who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, which everybody has to kind of develop their own spiel, and I think if you've been doing it long enough, you've kind of got one that when you go to the door, you know what you're going to say. I typically just introduce myself. I say, hey, I'm Chris Armstrong, and tell them where I live. I live down the road, or I live in Tennessee, and I like to research history and historic sites. And, you want to be as kind of unobtrusive to them as you can and as brief as you can, but at the same time, give them all the information they need to know that, you're okay and you're not a threat. And the reality of asking permission is it's just kind of like relic hunting. You're going to get a lot of no's, and you just have to kind of roll with the punches and go to the next door. I know when Dad and we went to Boston, and we're in a place called Weymouth or something, and we were going door to door, and we got like 20 no's before we got a yes, and it's just the reality of door knocking, I think, is you have to persevere, just like relic hunting. I think patience and perseverance are kind of two big traits for a good relic hunter.
I've been in situations where I have business cards made up, and then, of course, Seven does too, and that's helped me a lot of times. It has my information on it, and then they see it, and they be like, well, hey, he's okay, so...
My card...
And that's one of the first things I do as well is, when I introduce myself, I give them my card. And like you say, that kind of takes them off of guard a little bit when they feel like they can identify you and they know who you are and where you're from and what you're doing. And sometimes it'll surprise you if you say, hey, I'm from down the road. They'll say, oh, yeah, my brother's from down there. Or, so I think the more conversation you can have with them in a way, there on that doorstep, the more common ground you might find with them, and the more likely they might be to let you go out and meditate their land. And if you can find common ground with the landowner, that's a great in, to be able to meditate their property. So, but it's a big part of it. I just moved down here to this area recently, and I'm still kind of trying to find the grocery, let alone trying to find a place to relic hunt. So it's been a challenge that I'm enduring as well right now, is kind of being out looking for new places to relic hunt. So it's tricky.
Yeah, Barb said that's my problem. I'm a dang Yankee in Southern land.
You just need to work on your accent.
Yeah. She's got the accent all right. And she, I think that... I think she'd go a long way, getting in the door on getting some permissions and everything. I actually have on my card that I do historical research. That has helped me. And also I have a lot of networking where I've got other people that, of course, I live in a small town, and I know everybody just about, and everybody knows what I do, and I donate quite a bit of stuff to the museum. And, if somebody calls me and they've lost a ring or something, and Jeff just went and found a ring the other day.
Sure did. Yep, right down the road.
And that's another big secret, like you're saying, is networking. Is everybody you meet is a potential permission. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but I think about that a lot when I'm out and I meet people or farmers, or I meet people in general. I always try and somehow sneak in that I like to go out and relic hunt and look for old historic artifacts and things like that into the conversation if I just find myself in a conversation with somebody. And you'd be surprised how many times they're like, oh, well, my uncle has a big farm, or, something like that. So I think keeping the conversation going about your passion. If it's your passion to go out and look for these things, then the more people you can let know about it, the better, because it can lead a lot of places, and even further down the road, people think, oh, well, I know a guy who likes to relic hunt. I should tell him about this. So it's good to let people know about it and just communicate with it. And again, communicate with landowners when you're on their front step about, who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, that's true. And Jeff and I were lucky enough. We're on a property. The last two videos that we did are off of the same property, and the landowner went down to the barn, got the bush hog, and bush hogged the spot, and he would stop, and he'd come over and say, where do you think would be another good spot? And he actually hunted with us some. And
yeah, he did. He found the best find, actually. So
he did. He found on the first hunt, I think that counterfeit seeded quarter that you found on the last hunt was the best. Couple of more questions here. Jeffrey Kalin says, I use an AT Pro with a stock coil. Does it really pay to hunt with? Let me tell you something other.
That's what we use.
That is all that I use on the colonial sites that I hunt. And then he was asking about the bigger coils, and Barb answered this one here the way that I would, that I will go to my 5x8 in the real trashy areas because you get a whole lot better separation You lose a little depth.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, not a whole lot. And I mean, that 5x8, it's real good in the trashy areas. And of course, I don't have one. I just have still 7s.
Yeah. What I found with the 5x8 is you get nearly the same depth if you hunt slow. And I think that's, a big key with those smaller coils is hunting really slow because, the way those VLF machines work is they send out a pattern that gets narrower as it goes deeper. So by the time your machine is at its maximum depth, and I always looked at it like an ice cream cone. It's like a big, wide kind of pattern at the top, and it gets smaller at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And near the bottom of your range, you might only be covering an area as big as a $50. So to overlap that area, you have to move really slow, and especially if you're in an iron-infested area. But, if you're in the iron, you're probably in the relics. So,
yeah, I tell you what, I don't feel right. And we run our AT Pro, and I'll tell Jeffrey this, give him a pointer on how Jeff and I run ours. We don't run in audio, iron audio. We run in iron disc and run it at 0. Mm-hmm. We run in we run Pro 0. And
yeah, that's how I run it too.
Sensitivity all the way up.
All the way up, and you hear absolutely everything, but you hear those little chirps of repeating high tones in that iron. And if you're running Discrimination, I don't think you hear those. Do you?
No, they get blocked out. They get blocked out because it starts to cut those out. All the Discrimination is doing is basically notching those signals out. And so while it's trying to notch those out, it's going to catch everything else that's in there. And you get a lot of iron masking especially a Colonial site, you dig enough flat buttons and stuff and that kind of stuff where you're listening for the tiniest chirp. And if you're swinging your coil, fast and furious, you're going to miss those things. And if you've got your Discrimination up, you're going to miss those things. So it's, just being tedious and slow and being willing to dig through the trashy signals to get the good ones because they're in there hiding for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And, if I get a good signal now, a really, really good signal, I'm apprehensive about even digging it unless it's a brand new site because, we've hunted some of the places that we've hunted so much that you're not going to get a good signal. And
you have to fight for the places, that people haven't hunted and the ones people haven't dug. Some of my best finds have been in like the most miserable part of the field or, close to the electric fence or, near the briar patch or places people didn't want to hunt. And that's the only place though that you seem to get those, screaming good signals if it's a place you've been hunting. So, well, like you say, you got to chase the ghosts.
Yeah, you do. And anybody that watches mine and Jeff's videos, we love the thickets, don't we?
No, we sure do. I mean, a rabbit couldn't even get in most of them.
I remember the rock wall house where we were hunting. I don't remember what Jeff found, but he come crawling through. He couldn't stand up.
Yeah, couldn't stand up. Had to crawl.
I was in some briars, and he was in some briars, and he come crawling over there because I was filming a clip, and I made the statement. I said, well, he's crawled over here to me like a dog and going back like the dog that he is. But, yeah, you got to get in those spots. Hey, BirdDogg, how do you go about researching? I'm sure that's a question that everybody asked. But what's your secret?
Well, there's a million different ways to go about it. But honestly, my go-to is eHistory on OSU site, and if you go online and you Google eHistory OSU, and of course I pretty much exclusively hunt Civil War relics when I'm actually relic hunting. So they have a searchable version of the official records of the Civil War there, and you click on it, and basically you enter a search term for a place. If you wanted to hunt a place, say you wanted to hunt Cumberland Gap. You type in Cumberland Gap, and it'll bring up every reference to the Cumberland Gap in the official records of the Civil War, and these are handwritten references by people who were there. So that's kind of my first go-to place. And then I'll start to try and correlate anything that they talk about, place locations, roads. A lot of times the roads will still exist, so if you can find those types of locations, it'll make things easier. And you can also correlate those with historic aerials, which is another website where you can look at old roads and old maps.
And Jeff,
that's kind of my go-tos.
Jeff and I use historic aerials quite a bit.
We do.
Because you can overlay the old USGS maps on a current aerial, and you can tell exactly what it looked like then and exactly what it looks like now. And that's an underused asset, I think, is historic aerials.
Oh, yeah.
People will say, well, it only goes back to the 20s in my place. That doesn't matter. I mean,
no.
Because if you have a house that was there in the 20s, 1 out of every 5 of those that we hunt turns out to be that there was a colonial site under it.
Sure does.
Sure.
So
yeah, and it can show you where non-existent roads were that are gone now, and the lay of the land, because you figure between 1860 and 1920 is 60 years. That's a generation. So, a lot of those homes were being built just after the Civil War, and even if it is a 1920s home, there could be, home sites are where you find most of your good relics anymore, because all the battle sites have been picked over and all the known sites have been picked over. So getting in those old home sites is where you really start to pick out the good relics these days, it seems.
Yeah, the site Men 7 was hunting the rock with the rock wall and the little pond next to it. That's what was going on there. It was a newer home that had been built on top of the old site. And, of course, we were just finding a lot of modern trash, and all of a sudden was getting ready to go. And he said, if it's not a flat button, we're leaving. So I dug it, and sure enough, it was a flat button. And I ended
Tomback.
Yeah, it was a Tomback. And I ended up finding a War of 1812 artillery button there. On that same hunt. So
wow.
It turned out to be a good site.
And a couple of hunts later, I got a cut Spanish silver off of it, and a lot of flat buttons. But you just got to be patient. You got to be patient.
Just a few days ago, my buddy Bob was showing me he has like thousands of Tomback buttons that are in undug condition that were like attic finds. Thousands of them, like whole uniform sets full of them. It's unbelievable. Every size, everything up there. And he goes treasure hunting a lot at the flea markets up in New England and finds just the most amazing things. He sent me home with some really incredible gifts, a ginger beer bottle from the Civil War that he finds, and he finds all kinds of things up there going to those flea markets. But I thought it was neat to see all those Tombacks, how they looked, in original condition.
I can only imagine, because they look good now when they come out of the ground.
Yeah.
We got Forrest. It said, BirdDogg, what's your favorite find, or do you have one?
It's tricky to put a finger on my favorite. There's a couple favorites. I have a martingale plate that still has the leather safe on the back of it I found up in Kentucky relic hunting with my dad. And not only does that one just mean a lot to me because of my dad, being with my dad and where we were at. We were hunting a really big battle there, Perryville in Kentucky. And the spot in the field, knowing actually where it was a place where the Confederates had pushed forward Claiborne's troops. And that was a really great find. The leather's still intact and perfect. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of my favorites. But really, artillery shells have been my focus lately, getting out and looking for those in the summertime. And I think some of those have been my favorites, finding those and getting to find them with my dad out in the water. That's really great. This year, just recently on a hunt with my dad, it's been about a month and a half ago, he found a Confederate rifle barrel in the river with me, and it was still loaded. So getting to see him find that was one of the most amazing things for me, you know.
I've seen that.
And I think more than the finds, it's really just the memories, being out with people and being out by yourself. Even when you're out with yourself, just, you know, the way the day goes and remembering the day, because, you know, I think that's as big a part of it as the relic. So
nature, being in nature is a good part.
What was that piece that you put on? I don't know if you put it on Facebook or something the other day, but they had made that out of bullets that had been fired at them. What was that piece? That
was a mortar, wasn't it?
It's a mortar, yeah, that has been made out of bullets, and it's actually my buddy Bob's piece, and it's a mortar that was made from bullets fired at Fort Hill, which I think, I may be wrong, but I think it was at Petersburg, and but anyway, it was made from infield bullets, fired Confederate bullets. And I guess a Union soldier had made it. So it's pretty neat. And evidently there's an article somewhere about those mortars, but it's definitely one of the coolest relics I've ever held.
It was a great...
It probably weighs 5 pounds. I mean, it's crazy how big it is.
Didn't they sign that too, put their name on it?
Yeah, the soldiers' names across the front of it.
Well, that was kind of like...
pretty amazing relic.
That was kind of like what we did with Hiroshima, wasn't it? Put the names.
That was another flea market find for Bob, as a matter of fact. He found that at a flea market up there. And in fact, we went to one in New Hampshire this last trip while we were up there, and there was a George Washington button for sale, George Washington inaugural button for sale at the flea market. It was unbelievable. And we were sorting through buttons, finding Civil War buttons and like these poke baskets that, you know, were like grandma's old buttons, and you're just sorting through it, finding Civil War buttons, and I mean, it is unbelievable, really cool.
Gordon had a question too. Wanted to know what you take on your kayak whenever you water hunt.
Well, it just depends on the day. Some days, if I'm going on a longer paddle, you know, I always take my detector, obviously. My pick is my main and really only tool I use water hunting, and my pinpointer. You're pretty well lost in the water without a pinpointer, because if, say that you're in waist deep water and you get a signal that sounds like a mini ball, the only way you're going to get it is to kneel down, and your face is going to be in the water, and, you know, trying to locate something like that in moving water is impossible without a pinpointer. So pinpointer's a must. I always take, you know, water. I have a dry box or a dry bag that I always take with me, and have my phone, you know. And the big thing about water hunting, especially, you know, I probably am wrong to go out by myself water hunting, but I do. And being that I do go out by myself, I always let someone know where I'm going, like Cassie Lee, my fiance, or I'll call my dad. And I even go as far as to send them coordinates as to where I'm putting in sometimes, because, you know, it'd be really, really easy when you're water hunting, especially in some of the environments I water hunt in, muddy water full of tree branches and snakes and, you know, God knows what. But it'd be really easy to get hurt out there, or get tangled up, or even to drown, you know, out there in running, flowing water. Mm-hmm. And you got to let people know where you're going. And so I always carry a dry box, too, with a phone in case I do have an emergency out there. And, you know, just a lot of water and a lot of patience. So.
Yeah. I know that you went down and hunted with Ron with Dig Dogs, and they are really big on water hunting down there. They
love it.
even to the point that that they're about halfway scuba diving whenever they do it, ain't they?
Well, they do scuba sometimes, and they found some cool stuff down there. A lot of bullets, and I've been lucky enough to go hunt with them a couple times. I had a hunt this year with them where we were at a river crossing, and we were finding bullets everywhere, all over the place. And then right in the middle of the bullets, I found a seated Liberty 1861. I think it was 1861 quarter. I'd have to look, but it was definitely a war period quarter. And so that was really cool to find with those guys.
You found that going close to a bridge or a trestle or something, didn't you? Well,
it was a ford. They forded the river there. And we found a bunch of stuff in there. I think I found a pocket watch, and we found some artillery pieces in there. And just been a lot of stuff come out of there. And I've had pretty good success this year water hunting. I found a couple artillery shells and a lot of pieces of artillery shells. I think in the water this year I found probably 400 bullets, all kinds of little, pocket watches and pocket knives and random pieces of iron. I was hoping to find a rifle this year, but I found a cannonball on a Thursday. My dad drove down that night. And then we went the next day, and he found the rifle about 50 feet past where I had found the cannonball. So, but I was happy to see him find that. Like I said, he was able to take it to some friends of his and have it x-rayed, and it's still loaded.
I seen that.
It's amazing.
I seen the pictures of the x-ray where it was still loaded. Sheldon Holmes is in the house. Hello, Sheldon.
Hey, Sheldon.
Good to have you in. We're kind of going up against, I think M.A. Lyman had Keebs on tonight at the same time. So.
Well, that's good. That's a good guest there.
yeah, we had Keebs on the last time.
Mm-hmm.
I think a question that a lot of people would probably like to hear your answer to is, when you go to, let's just say that you're going to hunt a colonial house site, and it's the first time that you've been there, how do you approach that site, and how do you change that approach as you hunt it more times?
Well, I think like everybody, if you just rolled into a brand new colonial site, you're excited and you want to see what the potential is to be there. So I think, I always will run in with full discrimination off, no discrimination at all. And just kind of listen to the ground and what's there and what kind of signals I'm hearing. Is it an area that's full of trash? Is it an area that's full of iron signals? Is it relatively clean? And sometimes I might move relatively quickly around different parts of the house to kind of get a feel for what's in the ground in different parts of the house. Because, a lot of times with the colonial, what I'm looking for is the trash dump. And oftentimes that'll be off the back of the house somewhere. And so sometimes I'll kind of just spot shoot a house at first and see what's there. Kind of do a sample or a culture, as the stealth diggers call it, and see what kind of targets might be at the location. And, then depending on what type of targets are coming out of the ground, you might slow down significantly. You might, move to a different part of the yard. So it's just a process of moving through. And another thing I've done a lot at those types of sites is, even though, the AT Pro might be great there and I might find all kinds of things there, it might be good to come back, even if you think you've hunted a site out, come back with a different machine, and like the T2, or I use the Nautilus, or a machine that's hunting on a different frequency, because sometimes a lot of targets will pop out to one machine. And I honestly think some machines like certain targets more than others.
I think you're right.
The Nautilus loves buttons. I mean, that is the most button machine. I've never dug so many buttons as I do with the Nautilus. And I think the AT Pro, and this isn't a bad thing. People might think this is a bad thing when I say it, but I think the AT Pro loves iron. And that's not a bad thing if you're somebody like me who hunts artillery shells and pieces of bayonets and locks and different random things that I might find in the river. That's a great thing. The AT Pro also loves, other signals, but I just think, like I said, there's certain things that the machine is just great at, and I think the AT Pro is great at digging those out and at picking out those little teeny chirps like you were talking about in an iron area. So knowing your machine and knowing what might work in that area, and then coming in and trying different machines and different approaches. It's as simple as sometimes if you walk over a target going straight forward, and then maybe you walk at it going, across that, you may hear a signal that you didn't hear. So,
well, if you've got
just a process.
If you've got a coin that's standing up on edge, and you hit that to where you're getting the full width of that, it's narrow, but you're getting the full width, you're going to get a pretty good signal. If you turn 90 degrees to that, you're only getting the thickness of that thickness of the coin, and it's not going to sound.
It could just disappear almost, Yeah. Especially in an iron area.
I dug a $50 that way. It would only give me a signal one way. And then you had to stand in that one spot before you get a signal, and then I went ahead and dug it, and there it was. Yeah.
And another thing I'll say about colonial sites and iron is if you're in the iron around a colonial site, then you're in a target-rich environment. Mm-hmm. You need to slow down. And my dad's digging mentor always said, if you're in the iron, you're in the relics. And, he always dug colonial sites in Virginia that were, 1600 sites around Williamsburg, Yorktown area. And, that's what you're looking for. If there's a big patch of iron somewhere out behind a colonial house, you probably ought to slow down and really pick through it, because there could be some amazing stuff in there. So.
Yeah, I've seen Jeffrey. He had to go. So thanks for watching, Jeffrey, and hope you enjoyed the show.
And I don't know if we said anything there a while ago, but J.J. Johnson
there's JJ.
is in the house. Right. And appreciate him being in here. You're right. When you hit a place with different machines, you not only are the frequencies may be different, maybe the targets sound different, but also you dig different with one machine. You can get accustomed to not digging a certain sound on one machine. And if you trade machines, you're going to get that sound, but it's going to be different, and you may probably dig it.
Yeah. A prime example of that is, I dug a bayonet about 2 years ago in a yard that I had hunted. I mean, literally, I'd hunted this yard probably 50 times with my Nautilus. And I had dug buttons and rings and coins and just a multitude of relics out of this yard. And in a spot, I know without a doubt I'd gone over this spot, many, many times with the Nautilus. And I went in there with the AT Pro and dug a bayonet like instantly, and it just sounded like a good repeatable signal that, like you said, it's a signal that I kind of avoid with the Nautilus, because you're hearing all metal in one ear with the Nautilus all the time. So it's just like wah all the time in an iron area. So I'd probably just skip that bayonet, and listen for the high beats with the Nautilus. So.
Yeah, and Duran said that he'd found a Company B in the middle of a bunch of iron, and he said, just have to slow down and pick them out, and that's the secret. And
that is.
I've kind of challenged myself. I've got several sites that are real close to the house here that if I've got an hour or two to hunt, that I'll go to them. And here recently, what I've been doing is I've been kind of gridding me out maybe a 5 by 10 spot, and where I've probably found a lot of stuff before, and just say I'm going to grid that, I'm going to circle that, I'm going to stay in that 5 by 10. And it is unbelievable. Every time that you do that, you find another target because you're just going slow.
I was told by older relic hunter at home, every time you hunt a spot, he said, go slower. Every time you go back, slow down some more. Then the next time, slow down some more. And he said you'll get a lot of the relics that way.
Oh, yeah.
But they're never dug out.
Yeah.
No,
they're not. And, it never ceases to amaze me at the end of the year how many relics that, we end up with. It's just like, wow, if you put in the work and you put in the hours, you're going to dig relics. And that's kind of the end of the day thing. You got to put in the legwork and you got to put in the hours, and it's a numbers game. They'll start to turn up. And once you start to learn those patterns of where they're turning up and what you're doing, and they start to turn up more and more.
Yep. Research and swinging. I mean, that's
it.
That's it.
And a lot of people may disagree with what I'm about to say, but Jeff and I have tried this, and it does make a difference because I know we're hunting some spots that we've already, people say, well, I've hunted that to death. But moon phase makes a big difference. If you've got a new moon or a full moon, signals are going to be stronger than they will on the other moon phases. And I've also found that of course, obviously when the ground is wet, the signal sounds better.
Yeah.
But
I've
had where the ground was wet, everything else, the moon phase is the same, but you hunt there in the morning at 9 o'clock, and you may not have any signals. You can go back that afternoon at 4 or 5 o'clock, and I don't know what changes, but there may be signals popping
everywhere.
And I think it has a lot to do with the atmosphere. I don't know what the reason is. Have you seen that, though, in your hunting?
Well, I mean, I've not noticed it, but I could see how it might affect it, with maybe just the water in the ground itself, how the water's being affected by the moon phase or, the time of year, time of day. I mean, I could see that having an effect on it for sure, and definitely with the atmosphere and the pressure in the air could affect it, I would think.
Well, I mean, it's all electronics, and so you're anything that affects that's going to affect the signal as well.
Now, I will say that like you say, going back to spots that you've hunted, that's kind of music to my ear when older relic hunters tell me that these days. Oh, that place was hunted out, and especially in areas with hot soil, like where I'm at. That's exactly where I want to hear about, is where's the places that were hunted out, in the 80s, and they were probably in there with a VLF, and
right.
Just I have visions of dancing through there with my pulse machine.
Whenever I first got my GPX, the very first place that I went to was the Civil War site. It's just about a mile from my house here. And it was like a completely new place.
Yeah.
I mean,
somebody put new relics out there.
Yeah.
Almost.
I mean, because you're getting on down to the next level,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I found that the soil is mineralized pretty heavily there in Kentucky, and there's a lot of sites where in East Tennessee where I thought the soil wasn't that bad, and was using my VLF just as happy as could be, and I go back there with my pulse machine and just kill it. I mean, relics come out everywhere, and it's just the pulse machine, like you say, you could never take it to a home site or a place with a lot of trash. It's strictly a relic machine, but if you get out in a relic-rich area and turn it loose, it's a beast. You start to pull a lot of new relics out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Forrest said that he is using the Z-Link headphones on his AT Pro and wanted to know what our opinion of that was. I'll say something first. Jeff and I don't use headphones on our AT Pro.
Mm-mm.
Unless we're in unless we're in a real noisy area. We leave them open because I like to hear what he's hearing, and he likes to hear what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And we both have really good hearing, so it doesn't bother us, to not have the headphones. I can still hear those little chirps without headphones. Of course, on the GPX you have to use them. So, but
yeah, I always use them. I think I always use headphones because I like to just disappear into the into the headphones. Help. It feels like when I put on the headphones, it feels like everything else in the world disappears at that very instant, and I can just think about what happened in the past or what I'm looking for, that sort of thing. But I haven't had any experience with the Z-Link. It looks like a dream. It really does. For somebody who uses headphones, it looks great to be unattached to it. I don't know what the response would be. I don't know if there's any delay. I'm sure they've got it pretty well worked out, though.
From what I've heard,
we're able to communicate wirelessly with Bluetooth and stuff pretty well, so they should have it worked out.
Yeah, from what I hear, there's hardly any delay at all. I mean, you're in good shape as far as that goes. One reason why I don't wear headphones, I hunt with Jeff, and you don't never know when he's going to sneak up behind you and do something other to you.
Yeah.
Slap me in the face.
Well, and it's good for you all shooting video for sure. It's good to let everybody hear your tones. I know it's hard for me, especially water hunting, juggling the camera. If I'm in current, with my camera and my pick and my detector and trying to get a relic and trying to get the shot, it's murder, trying to do all that stuff for people doing video and trying to do a video where you're sharing the experience with the viewer and not just kind of showing them the relic, and it's tricky out there doing that stuff. So.
And during the summer, it's real hot. I mean, you get the headphones on and it just smothers me up.
Well, that's why I don't hunt on the land in the summer anymore. I'm only in the water in the summer. It has to cool off quite a bit for me to be ready to get in the water, into the land hunting again, for sure, since I've gotten into water hunting. It's a different world, man.
It is, and I've hunted a little bit in the lakes and things with my water machines, including the AT Pro. And whenever I'm there, I wear the waterproof headphones when I'm in the water, But, it's a different animal when you're in the water than when you're out on land and everything.
It is. It's a lot of work. It's very strenuous. There's a lot of things to keep up with. If you're dragging your boat, you're dragging a pick, and you're dragging relics, and you're trying to stay safe and not get hurt out there. It's definitely a different beast, but it's something about it. It feels really, to me, and I don't know, maybe it is all of the struggles that you go through water hunting, because you slip and you fall and you're bleeding and it's a crazy day sometimes. So it feels so rewarding to find something, even if it's a mini ball, and something that we find commonly as Civil War relic hunters. I think this year I found probably about 800 mini balls total so far, and so it's a relatively common find, but for some reason in the water, it feels so much more gratifying because, like I said, I've paddled and bled and slipped and fell and nearly drowned, and finally I find a mini ball and I'm like, yes, like such a success.
I've got a question. Hunting the creeks, I've done it a few times. I've got a couple of videos on my channel. When you're walking through the creek on the slick rocks, how do you keep from falling all the time?
Well, what I've done is, for one thing, you definitely want to get a pair of boots that you just designate for water hunting. And I just went to Walmart or somewhere and bought just some work boots, cheap work boots, $25 work boots or whatever. And then I came home and took an industrial stapler, not for staples for paper, but for construction staples. And then I just staple all around the bottom of my shoe and kind of make my own tread design with these staples in there. And they will blow out over time, but then you just staple more in. So it's, it's not that hard to staple more in. And that works pretty good for me. Like I say, you definitely want to have something with ankle support, because you're going to twist your ankle, you're going to fall, you're going to break your metal detector, you're gonna do a lot of different things water hunting. I've broken my Garrett AT like pro probably 8 or 9 times in the last 2 years and had to send it in for repairs. I've gone through 10 coils. You know, it's very hard on equipment. It's very hard on you. At the end of the day, you feel like somebody's been beating you with a metal detector all day. You know, but it's like I said, it's very rewarding if you like getting outside, if you're not afraid of the water, if you're not afraid of snakes. You know,
that's what I was going to say.
It's a very rewarding way to do it.
I'm not scared of the water. I'm just scared of what's in it. So
I see a lot of snakes, and a lot of times it's very disconcerting doing it near me because the water's never clear here. I mean, where I live, the water always looks like chocolate milk. And, you know, every time I stick my arm underwater or I start swimming, because if you're in chest-deep water, you basically have to swim down underwater to get your relic. And every time I do it, I'm envisioning those guys who noodle for catfish, you know. They stick their arms down and like a 100-pound catfish grabs them. That's all that goes through my mind when I'm underwater there. It's just like, oh my God, what is getting ready to eat me down here?
So have you ever grabbed anything you didn't want to?
In the river I got bit twice by a snake, in the river, same snake, and he bit me on the leg, and I reached down and grabbed him, and then he bit me on the hand. But it was just a water snake, and it left probably 30 or 40 little holes in me, you know, with its little teeth, but didn't kill me. And I think it scared him just as much as it scared me.
I'm sure.
So we're equal, I guess.
Before we get out of here tonight, and we've already ran over an hour, I told you it'd go fast. Tell everybody how they can get in contact with you and about your YouTube channel, Facebook, and what have you.
Well, I'm on YouTube there under BirdDogg with 2 D's and 2 G's. BirdDogg with 2 G's at the end. And that's probably the best place to get me. On Facebook, I'm under my real name, Chris Armstrong. And you can try and find me on there. There's other Chris Armstrongs I figured out. There's even another Chris Armstrong who Relic, which is kind of crazy. But so the best way to probably find me is through YouTube. And there's a lot of videos on there of me relic hunting and playing music and all the random things I do. I haven't been putting any videos up here lately, but I'm actually getting ready to get after it soon because my computer is so bogged down with video files. So I've got about 400 and something gigabytes of metal detecting videos to upload.
Well, we certainly do appreciate you being here tonight.
Sure
appreciate all the people that are in the chat tonight. And want to tell everybody, you know, Gordon said, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget. Do that.
Don't forget it.
And also follow us. And we're certainly going to have you back on, BirdDogg. Appreciate you taking this time out tonight to be with us and talk to us.
Yeah.
And
well, I appreciate you guys talking to you, and I'm glad we were able to link up and do it. Thank you to everybody who joined in for sure. Hope you guys find some great goodies out there.
Same to you, and hopefully we get back together and hunt for another time or two before.
Yeah, it's that time of year.
Yeah,
it is that time.
Anyway, appreciate having you on tonight, and appreciate everybody watching us. We'll be back on. Well, we'll be on Beyond Sight and Sound Sunday night at 6 o'clock Central Time. That'll be 7 o'clock Eastern Time. So if you can, we'll come and join us there, and certainly do appreciate it. So this is Diggin with 7.
This is Tennessee Jeff.
And we're Relics Radio, and appreciate you guys, and we're going to close it on out then.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Relics Radio. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. A special thanks to our guest and to you for your comments and questions. We really do appreciate it. Take a minute and hit the like button, and be sure that you follow us on Spreaker so that you can get notifications of all of our upcoming broadcasts. You can also find us on YouTube at Diggin with 7 or Tennessee Jeff. Or you can check us out on Facebook at Diggin with 7 or Jeff Warwick. If you'd like to get in touch with us, then send an email to digginwith7@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We hope that you'll join us on our next broadcast. And until then, get out there and dig some history.